Can you just introduce yourself and why you're here?
Hello, I'm Dennis Chan, and I donated bone marrow a month and a half ago. All right. I actually donated at Georgetown Hospital, and so the night before I stayed at a hotel right across the street, and I was there with my fiance, and so we had to get up and meet a representative from the hospital at 6:30 in the morning in the lobby. So they came and got us, and then we were immediately shuffled into the pre-operation room where they just told me to wear a robe, and they just gave me all these forms to fill out right before the procedure, as well as meeting the doctor who's going to perform the procedure and talk to the anesthesiologist that was on site. And so we kind of went through the logistic part of going through the procedure is just kind of what's going to happen and the timeline as to how it's going to work. They also were kind of worried at first because I told them that I had drank some water because my fiance said that I should probably drink a little bit of water before the procedure. And so I had a little bit and they started freaking out. And so I didn't realize that it was that big of a deal, but it was because of the anesthesia. The anesthesiologist was kind of worried that it would change like my body weight and things like that. So they said it ended up being not that much of a difference, so it was okay. But it kind of worried us in the beginning, but it turned out to be all right. So after that, that probably took maybe 30 minutes, and then the anesthesiologist was putting something into my IV, and she basically was like, all right, you're gonna start feeling dizzy very soon, and immediately afterwards, they rolled me out, and I knocked out. And so I didn't actually, feel anything from the procedure, and I woke up in the post-operating room maybe like 3 hours later, 2.5 to 3 hours later, and then they rolled me into my recovery room where my fiance was waiting. By that point in time, I hadn't really moved, so I couldn't tell if things hurt or if I was feeling okay. I just knew that I was really hungry, so the nurse came by and told me that I was going to get my lunch, and she also took my blood pressure, and so I think that was the first time where I actually kind of shuffled my body to get into a better position, and I felt like there was some kind of interesting pain in my lower back, and as well as a very big pack of bandages that was also sitting there, and an ice pack too. So that was kind of a first little shock as to like how I was going to feel, and kind of let me know what my mobility was, because even moving forward was a little bit difficult. But I ate all my food, and they gave me some more medication, and eventually, I think around 6 p.m., they told me that another nurse was going to come down and kind of give me a post-operation discussion as to what's going to happen from this point on for the next day and then the next week, as well as talking about how to tend to the actual procedure site and the bandages and everything like that. And so we went through all that, and they were kind of hopeful that I would probably be able to leave the hospital that night, which is, I think, something that doesn't usually happen with a lot of the patients that go to Georgetown. So they ended up just allowing me to go back to the hotel room across the street because it was so close, by around 7:30, after taking an initial walk around the ward. So it ended up not being that bad. The only thing that I could remember feeling at that time was that it was really hard for me to walk. I had to walk very slowly, but pain-wise, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So that was kind of nice. So by the time that 8 o'clock rolled around, we were back in our hotel room, and that was pretty much the end of our day, which was actually pretty nice. Before I donated, I didn't initially tell my parents. It actually kind of came about afterwards. But when I first heard about the fact that I would be able to donate to this patient, I told my fiance, and then I told my brother. And so my brother, he was a little bit worried when I first told him because he has a friend that donated bone marrow before, and I guess it was a bad experience. And so he had a kind of more of a negative idea towards bone marrow donation, but after we kind of talked it over on the phone, it turned out to be not, you know, he knew the value of donating for someone else, and so it ended up being okay. But then he was the one that actually told my parents. I was kind of hesitant to tell my parents because, I mean, starting from going to the Peace Corps, they didn't really, you know, at first it took a little bit of time to get them to be on board with that. But then, you know, going right into something like bone marrow donation, where they have no idea as to what it is and what it entails, I think I was kind of worried that they would take it the wrong way. But once I actually did call them, they had already talked to my brother, so he told them, not knowing that I hadn't told them yet. And so when I did talk to them, my mom was you know, like any other mom, she was definitely worried about the whole procedure. But my dad, surprisingly, was actually very, very supportive. And so it was actually very nice that, you know, he saw the value of being able to save someone else's life over anything else. And the fact that I was young and that it probably wouldn't affect me that much, you know, he was pretty confident that that would be the right thing to do. And after I explained to them what the process actually, the procedure actually entailed, I think they're definitely a lot more, you know, welcome to the idea of donating. I do remember reading that there was a possibility of something going wrong during the procedure or afterwards. However, I've had surgery before, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of the complications that would occur would be from probably something like the anesthesia or something to do with that, not necessarily to do with them actually pulling out the bone marrow or the site where they actually did that becoming infected in a way that is going to adversely affect me afterwards. So to answer your question, I don't think I really thought about it that much. I think, you know, 2% is pretty minimal to me, and I feel like there's a lot of other possibilities of something going wrong in my life aside from doing this procedure. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really say like have a definitive answer on something like that, but to me it wasn't that big of a risk where I would not want to go through with it when there's somebody else's life on the line. I have no idea. I was knocked out. But what the doctor did tell me, and what we actually witnessed after the fact, was you know, they were going to knock me out, then lean me over on the operating table, and basically on my pelvic bone, they were going to go to two different sites, both on the left and the right pelvic bones, and they were going to go straight into the bone marrow. Since a healthy person's bone, I guess, is not necessarily rock hard, it's more sponge-like. And so they just go in from two sites, and they go to multiple places along that pelvic bone to extract the bone marrow. So on the outside, you only end up seeing two holes, but inside your bone, you'd actually have multiple areas where they're pulling from. You know, even when you hear that, it's kind of hard to understand what that actually means. And so the next morning, they told me that we can actually take off the bandage. And the bandage was, I mean, it was huge. It was just full of gauze and very, very, very adhesive. And so I was just sitting under the shower for at least 15 minutes with warm water hitting it to be able to pull it off. And once we did, we realized that hole, they weren't exaggerating. The hole is probably like 1.5 millimeters, you know, in diameter, both of them, or smaller. And so you can't even really see it. It's not that huge. And the fact that they can take out all that bone marrow, this thing that gives you life, from those two small holes is actually pretty incredible. But it definitely is not as invasive as one would think. I think when I first thought about this whole procedure, the night before, I was thinking that I was going to be in a lot of pain. A lot of pain where it would bother me to do any kind of movement, whether it be sitting up in bed or walking to the bathroom or even going to the bathroom. I think that was kind of my biggest worry. But the only thing that it really was more of a minor discomfort, and every once in a while I'll get like a jolt of pain down my legs, but besides that it was pretty minimal. just very, very low mobility. I think that it's legitimate to be scared about something like that because it's such an unknown as to how you're going to feel. But at the same time, my physical pain and your physical pain is probably our threshold's going to be different. To me, it was not that painful. I mean, the procedure itself, you're knocked out, but afterwards, the recovery process, the only thing that I can say with certainty is that you're going to be walking really slow. The day after, up to probably the next week, I was walking really, really slow. Whereas I am normally the fastest walker that I know. I'm sure my fiance can attest to that. But I remember I'd be walking on the street to just kind of give myself exercise to, kind of make the soreness go away. And old people, men and women, people slowly walking their dogs aimlessly, they were all passing me by on the street. And it was definitely an interesting experience because I usually don't ever walk that slow, but it's something that's necessary. You just feel like you're a little bit more fragile. And so even going up and down steps, they tell you not to do that very often because of the amount of pressure that you're going to be putting on your back. Take the elevator, as well as not doing any heavy lifting, which is also very important. I moved my apartment the same week that we had the procedure. I had the procedure on Monday and we moved on Saturday. And I obviously wasn't picking up all of that stuff, but it still requires you to move some things around. And I was able to do that, and I was definitely mobile. So I don't think that I'm like 100% one of the most in shape people in the world, and I'm just kind of a normal person. So the fact that it wasn't that painful afterwards, as well as just being a little bit slow in walking and mobility, I don't think it's that big of a risk in pain factor, and definitely worth it for the end results. So right now it's been around a month and a half since I gave my bone marrow, and I would say that right now I feel like I could do pretty much anything that I did prior to the surgery. I have yet to go on like a really hard run on the sidewalk or even on a treadmill. I go on like a stationary bike, which is low impact, but and I haven't tried picking up anything over like 25 pounds yet. But I do feel like I could do it. So I would even say like up to a month after the surgery, I felt like I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable running at full speed outside on the pavement, but I would think that I would be able to do it now and it should be fine. I think that the pamphlet that the National Bone Marrow Program actually gives you is very accurate as to what their timeline of recovery is. I know it's not going to be the case for everyone, but 1 to 2 weeks you're going to be slow moving. You're not supposed to do any heavy lifting, and then the 2 to 3 weeks after that you can start exercising, but you're not going to be at full speed. But by the time you get to like a month and a half to 2 months, you should be pretty much at the same level as what you were before, and I think that's pretty accurate. I had my procedure done on Monday, and I didn't go into work on Tuesday, but Wednesday I was back at work. And I'm an accountant, so I sit at my desk pretty much all day long. But they do tell you that it's good for you to move around every 30 minutes, 15 minutes. Whenever you have a chance to talk to someone on your floor, they say just go up to their desk or their office, just so that you can move around. Because it is true where you do get sore if you're not moving. It's kind of like if you are moving around constantly, then it definitely helps you just feel better. And so it was literally it was 2 days where I wasn't at work and I was in on Wednesday, which I was kind of worried about that I wouldn't be able to do that, but it wasn't a problem. I went on the bus for public transportation to get to work, then I walked to my office and it wasn't a problem. So it's not too bad. That is also a very good question. Would I go through the whole procedure again for someone else or for the same person? Or
Either.
both? Okay. I think that I would go ahead and go through with it again. The reason why I'm on the bone marrow registry is for the purpose of giving my bone marrow, not for the purpose of saying that I'm on the registry and that's about it. I think that everyone that joins the registry should know that in advance, before signing all their paperwork, that this in fact could save someone else's life, and this choice that you're making should be something a lot more serious than, just looking good in front of your friends, or making yourself feel better for the time, but that it actually will not only affect hopefully your life, but also the lives of the person that you're donating to. And because of that alone, I think I would donate again if I had the opportunity. Um, they also do. I was surprised by this because I didn't really think about it, but they did send me a letter after, literally a week after I donated, that if it's okay for them to contact me again if the same patient needed my bone marrow, or just red blood cells, or anything related to my blood. And so they kind of have a list of things that you would allow them to ask for or not allow them to ask for. Which in the case if you don't want to, they will not contact you at all. They will let the doctor know that you are not interested, which is not a problem. But that is something that is there for you after the surgery as well. That's a good question. Now that it's been all finished, or hopefully finished for the time being, I feel fine. I think physically I am at the same level as I was as before the procedure. Um, I do constantly wonder though, like what's going on with the patient. Just, is she okay? Has she gone to remission, or is she not doing okay? I think you just tend to have that kind of question because it's something you gave, a part of you, to another person that you don't know, and it's something that will probably kind of linger there until I do hear something about it, whether just to give me closure, whether it's good or bad. Um, but in general, I feel like I feel the same. Every once in a while, I'll think to myself, I can't believe that I gave bone marrow. It's not something that I thought I would have done, before, and having that kind of opportunity is definitely rare and special.